Hello and welcome back to the Spanish Sling, a podcast where we try to bridge the gap between the Spanish and Singaporean companies and encourage economic relations between them. In one of our previous interviews with Joaquim Bellmunt, we discussed about obtaining a PhD in Singapore. Now we're going to talk about one of the most typical career paths after obtaining a PhD, research. This is why we welcome today Dr. Calvo-Baltanás. Welcome to Spanish Sling, Vanesa.
Hello, thank you very much for having me here.
So you're a research fellow at National University of Singapore.
Yes.
And I wanted to talk about the research ecosystem in Singapore because you're an expert, I guess, in this field, and you can provide really useful information for them.
Right.
So what are the main institutions or research centers in Singapore?
So Singapore, considered that it's such a small hub such a small hub for science, it has invested a lot on research and development. So there are different institutions that can deal with different topics of interest. So main institutions, public institutions would be NUS and Temasek. Then we will have NTU, which it's a community that benefits from both public and private investment. And we also have A-STAR, which is the main applied science research facility in Singapore. So they are more interested on developing patents, research related to engineering, and so on and so forth.
And where does the investment come from? Because you have talked about investment, and I guess like public and private investment. So which is the most typical?
So for public institutions, definitely the government flows in quite a bit of money. So depending what the agenda of the government at the time may be, there will be more or less money available for different topics. Now, food safety and food security is quite hot. So the University of Singapore, NUS, the National University of Singapore, for instance, is collecting a lot of money related to all these topics. A few years ago, it was more about nanotech and so on and so forth. So those fields were much more heavily invested on from the public perspective. The private sector, it really depends. It goes very fast.
Exactly.
So at the moment, yes, there is a bit of money coming from maybe breeding companies that are trying to establish themselves in Singapore. Not so much for research, but as a from a logistic perspective, so they can expand to the rest of the APAC region. But I would say, at least for my field, most of the money comes from the public, from the government. Okay. So it's public money.
And what are the main differences between the research ecosystem in Spain and Singapore?
So, as little as I know about the Spanish ecosystem related to research, I would say education here is very elitist. So students come in extremely well prepared, and there is no that many people interested in doing research in Singapore as compared to Europe, where traditionally it's a big career path. Here is more related to business or banking, lawyers, medicine, all this. But like fundamental research is not so big. So those that come our way are very sure that this is what they want to do, and they are the level is extremely high. So students that I had that coming from the bachelor directly, they are performing at PhD level already. So that is extremely fruitful from a research perspective, because they are very independent, they can perform very well. On the other hand, of course, when you have all these overachievers, competition starts to scale up. And that may be a little bit of an issue sometimes in some ways. So as compared to Europe or Spain in this case, I would say we are much more prone to collaboration and to bring the project forward and leave aside our personal interests, as long as we are able to progress. Whereas here we may be a bit more individualistic to be able to, because Singapore is a very competitive environment in general, and there are many career opportunities, and it's relatively easy for you to move forward in your career. but you need to perform at a certain level, which is very high. So you need to show and demonstrate continuously that you are at that level.
Yeah, so Singapore is competitive, so of course it shows on the research ecosystem.
Exactly, it's translated into every aspect, I would say.
Yes, and do you perceive that there's a real gap in terms of opportunities and professional opportunities between Spain and Singapore in research?
As in, if we are able to bridge the gap between the two nations, or?
No, in terms that maybe for a Spanish researcher or Singaporean one, can they follow similar paths? They have the same opportunities, the same resources?
Oh, no. no. For sure not. I mean, at least for my generation, when we studied biology, we were way too many licentiates, which we were called back in the days.
Yeah.
I'm like a grandma now. Back in the days when I started my bachelor.
It's always changing.
It's always changing.
Yeah.
So when I started my bachelor, it was a 5-year program, right? So now this is equivalent to a bachelor plus a master program. And back then, it was extremely complicated for those that study biology to actually find a job that pays for what you're doing. So usually the traditional path would be like finish your bachelor, find an internship, of course, non-paid internship, see whether you can access a paid program such as PhD, which, by the way, I wouldn't have been able to access because my grades were not high enough according to the Spanish system. So then I had to go to the Netherlands to do my PhD, and I obtained a grant that is it's a grant within an excellence program in the European Union. So it's the best grant that you can get. And that doesn't make any sense. So how come in a university I can get such a grant and in Spain I could not even access a PhD program? So that drives, I think, a lot of talent out.
Away, yes.
And so we got very discouraged by this, these problems and the lack of funding and the lack of opportunities, and knowing that you're gonna be late in your 20s without any real paid experience. So this was very discouraging. So I left, and so did many of my colleagues back then. Some decided to call it quits and just not pursue any career related to biology, which is what they studied, because it was just impossible to find a job. Whereas here, what I found is that, at least what I know of my students, the ones I train, as soon as they are done with their bachelors, they have a job. They can choose. They actually are in the position to choose what they like and what they want, and how much are they gonna get paid. So there are a lot of options. There are options for PhD, there are options for jobs in the government related to science, there are options in startups. And since Singapore is such a good education system, even if they want to leave, they're going to be accepted by basically anyone. Anyone would like to have a Singaporean in their team, because they are usually fluent in English, fluent in Chinese, or even any other language. So that was also very attractive from an employer perspective.
Exactly. So I guess the Spanish government has a lot of field to improve in these terms, and hopefully in the near future things can change and Spanish researchers can have a real opportunity in Spain.
Yeah, that would be the dream.
Yes. But meanwhile, what are the main advantages that you have mentioned for you, for example, working in Singapore? Do you have more resources, more freedom?
Yes, both
of
the things are true. Basically, I have to say, so when I was in the Netherlands, when I was working in the Netherlands and Germany, I was in the exact same situation. So I wouldn't say, well, Europe is doing much worse. So that's actually not true from my point of view, depending on the lab where you are in and the institution itself. But I do know that in Spain, resources, money is a problem. So and bureaucracy is a huge issue. So every time you want to move forward with a project, you really need to jump so many hopes to get to the point where you want to be, and by that time maybe that project would be phased out or not interested anymore.
And you're burned out in
a
way.
And then you don't want to do research anymore because you have done so much paperwork just to get to that point, to get a little bit of money to be able to buy reagents or a machine or whatever you need to do your research. I never had that experience ever. Not in the Netherlands, not in Germany, neither here. So the only problem in Singapore is because we are not a science hub as such. We have to import everything from abroad, mainly from Europe or the States. and sometimes from China as well. So that takes quite a bit of time, which can delay the progress of the of science itself, but usually it's really okay. So here, yeah, we do have a lot of resources. We do have the option to, we are a bit in the middle between, Western and Western civilizations, I would say, but that may be wrong. I don't know if you can say
That's correct. So
between Europe, the States, and China, and the rest of Asia.
Exactly.
So that is a very interesting point to be in order to connect with other institutions and promote collaboration. So yeah, as a researcher, you're very well paid here. I think it's the highest paid in the world for research, which is amazing. Because I think there is only one other country that pays that well, which is Switzerland, but it's not the same because Switzerland is more expensive. Living cost is higher, so it's much better in that regard to be here. Holidays are good. We have health insurance. Working hours are as normal as they can be. Like, of course, for research, it can be demanding at times because an experiment cannot last exactly 8 hours. Sometimes it lasts a weekend, and you have to be there. But it doesn't mean that part of your contract is not regulated. It is. You're supposed to work 8 hours a day, or 8 to 9 hours, and that's it. So that is quite standard.
So many advantages for a researcher in Singapore.
Yes, in general, many advantages.
Yes, and do you feel, or do you perceive that there's a certain profile that is most valued in Singapore in terms of researcher?
So of course, your language skills are gonna be checked. You have to be able to be absolutely fluent in English. You cannot come here, speaking broken English. That doesn't work. The professors are usually very top, in the sense that they had published in the best journals. They had been in the best institutions in the world. My supervisor was an Ivy League PhD student, then she moved to the best of the best in Germany, and then she was hired as professor here. So of course she has certain standards, and she's gonna value your profile according to those standards, and that's gonna apply to any other professor in Singapore. So yeah, you have to come usually from a good institution to start with. I wouldn't say there is a particular profile when it comes down to, I don't know, a cultural perspective. It's quite mixed. And there is a lot of foreigners doing research in Singapore. Like over 50% of the research personnel is expat. So Singapore does need these people because they don't have enough to supply the demand of research that they want to have in the country.
But they have to be well prepared and have language skills.
They have to. I mean, you have to be. I mean, NUS, for instance, is the best university or one of the best universities in Asia and top 10 in the world. So of course that's already the standard they start from. They will not accept anyone from anywhere. That's clear, and you have to work for it. And the MOM will value whether your profile is actually a good match for the project. It's not only your professor saying, "Hey, I want to invest in you." MOM may say, "No, this is not good enough for us."
Yes. So for any Spanish researcher that wants to pursue an international career, maybe here in Singapore, what final advice would you give them, Vanesa?
I would say, do as much as you can in terms of go to as many institutions as you can before coming here, do internships, get to know people, get to know projects, expand your horizon, your network. You have to work hard. Like, there's no way around it. It's not gonna come for free. If you want to do a PhD, you would say, okay, I would like to move to Asia. Just be a bit wise on which institution you may pick and in which background. Because you may love to do, botany or whatever. I'm a plant scientist, so I'm not disregarding botany in any way, but it's just that there's not enough funding here for that particular field because Singapore is not interested in that. So if you're thinking of moving to a particular country, you need to be smart about what that country is investing on. Otherwise, your profile will not be interesting enough.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, plan ahead. Don't go with the flow all the time. Sometimes it's good, but sometimes it may cause delays on your progression.
Yes, and good luck.
And good luck.
I guess.
Yeah.
So thank you so much, Vanessa, for your useful tips and for giving us an overview of the research ecosystem. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for the invitation.